It began on an otherwise unremarkable evening when Evelyn returned home, drenched from the sudden downpour, her coat dripping onto the floor. The flickering streetlights outside illuminated her sparsely furnished apartment. Her home was a sanctuary of routine. The old oak mirror in the hallway, inherited from her grandmother, stood solemnly as a witness to her hurried mornings and pensive nights. That night, however, something about the mirror unsettled her. At first glance, nothing appeared amiss. She saw her reflection staring back, the damp strands of her hair clinging to her face, and her tired eyes blinking slowly. Yet, as she leaned in to scrutinize herself, a flicker of movement in the reflection caught her eye. Evelyn froze. Her reflection had tilted its head a fraction of a second after she did, a delay so subtle that she might have dismissed it if not for the eerie chill creeping up her spine. Evelyn told herself she was simply exhausted. The week had been long, filled with endless deadlines and confrontations with her demanding boss. She dismissed the incident as a trick of her imagination, a side effect of too little sleep and too much caffeine. Yet the unease lingered. Over the next few days, she couldn't shake the feeling that her reflection was off. It wasn't just the delay in movements anymore. Sometimes she thought she caught her mirror self smiling faintly when she wasn't. At other times, its expression seemed a degree darker, as though it bore secrets Evelyn herself couldn't fathom. Desperate to prove her paranoia unfounded, Evelyn decided to conduct a simple experiment. She spent a quiet Saturday afternoon in front of the mirror, staring directly at her reflection. At first, everything seemed normal. She raised her right hand. So did her reflection. She blinked. So did it. But then, as the hours ticked by and dusk fell, her reflection's eyes began to seem deeper, darker, as if they were studying her with a curiosity all their own. At one point, when Evelyn stood up to leave, her mirror self remained seated for just a moment longer than it should have. Convinced something was wrong, Evelyn called her best friend Mia and confided in her. Mia, ever the skeptic, laughed it off. "Evelyn, you've been watching too many horror movies. It's just a mirror. Maybe it's time to take a break from work and get some fresh air." Though Mia's words were meant to reassure, they only deepened Evelyn's dread. What if no one believed her? What if her growing paranoia alienated her from the people she loved? The mirror began to haunt her waking hours. No matter where she was in the apartment, she felt its pull. It wasn't just the reflection anymore. It was as though the mirror itself was alive, a silent predator biding its time. She tried covering it with a sheet, but that only heightened her anxiety. She'd lie awake at night, staring at the shrouded form of the mirror, half expecting to see the fabric shift as though something on the other side was trying to push through. One fateful evening, Evelyn decided to confront her fears once and for all. She poured herself a glass of wine, set it down next to the mirror, and stared at her reflection. "What do you want?" she whispered, her voice trembling. To her shock, her reflection mouthed the words back at her, but there was no sound. Evelyn recoiled, her heart hammering in her chest. Gathering her courage, she touched the surface of the mirror, and for the briefest moment, she swore it felt warm, as though a living, breathing entity was trapped behind the glass. That night, Evelyn dreamed of a dark, endless corridor lined with mirrors. In each one, she saw herself, but every reflection was subtly different. Some wore twisted grins, others wept silently. One stood still while she walked, its eyes following her with an intensity that burned into her soul. When she woke, drenched in sweat, she found the old oak mirror in her bedroom instead of the hallway. She knew she hadn't moved it. Terrified, Evelyn sought answers. She began researching the history of the mirror, scouring through old family records and visiting antique dealers. What she uncovered only deepened her dread. The mirror was said to be cursed, a relic from a time when people believed that mirrors were portals to other realms. Legends spoke of doppelgängers, mirror doubles who could cross over into the real world if certain conditions were met. These entities were said to be harbingers of doom. replacing the original person and trapping them forever in the reflection. Evelyn's paranoia reached its peak. She avoided the mirror entirely, refusing to even glance at her reflection in windows or shiny surfaces. But the mirror seemed to call to her, its presence inescapable. Objects in her apartment began to move on their own, and she'd hear faint whispers at night coming from the direction of the mirror. One evening, as she sat on her couch, she saw her reflection in the darkened TV screen. It wasn't her. The reflection smiled, its teeth impossibly sharp, and whispered, "Soon." Driven to the brink of madness, Evelyn decided to destroy the mirror. She grabbed a hammer and swung it with all her strength. The glass shattered, and for a moment, she felt relief. But as the shards scattered across the floor, she saw hundreds of tiny reflections staring back at her, each one moving independently. They smiled in unison, and Evelyn realized with horror that breaking the mirror hadn't freed her. It had multiplied her tormentors. From that day on, Evelyn's life became a waking nightmare. Every reflective surface showed a different version of herself, each more sinister than the last. She avoided mirrors altogether, covering everyone she encountered. But the reflections found her regardless, on the surface of her coffee, in the polished metal of an elevator, even in the eyes of strangers. Her doppelgängers were everywhere, watching, waiting. One evening, Evelyn disappeared. Her apartment was found in disarray, the shattered remains of the oak mirror still on the floor. Neighbors reported hearing her scream, but no one saw her leave. The police found no signs of forced entry or struggle, only an unsettling message scrawled on the wall in what appeared to be her handwriting. "I'm on the other side now." The oak mirror was taken as evidence but vanished mysteriously from the police station a week later. Rumors of its cursed nature spread, and those who heard Evelyn's story swore never to look too closely at their own reflections again. After all, who's to say what might be staring back?